It is kind of a silly argument, but at the same time, it also kind of makes sense. And this is similar to the argument that Crevecoeur was making, right? That when things are out of sight and when things are out of mind, then we lose our sensibility about them. And that was the argument he was making, right? The people who live in Charleston, they don't see the mistreatment of their slaves back on the plantations. So it doesn't bother them because they don't hear the weeping. They don't hear the crying, right? They don't see the misery. And so it doesn't bother them. The parallel argument, right, was the implication that so too with the king, right? He doesn't see the suffering. So he's saying, look, the distance is a problem. If you're going to rule, you need to be proximate. The very fact that God put England over there and America here, he did because they're not supposed to rule us. Furthermore, he said, look at the timing of it. We discovered America right before the Reformation, and then the Reformation comes and we need a place to flee. You tell me. That's providence, right? This is a separate argument for a separate group of people. He's appealed to everyone as he's gone through his argument, and it's powerful stuff. He goes on to use nature several times. At the bottom of 344, nature has deserted the connection. He says at the top of page 345, a government of our own is our natural right. Right? Why? Well, he says near the bottom of 345, the Almighty hath implanted in us these unextinguishable feelings for good and wise purposes. Again, that humanity is good. That if we just listen to what's inside of us, and the intuition that we have is to be sensible to good and wise purposes. He says they're the guardians of his image in our hearts. If we were made in God's image, how can we be evil? Our nature must be good. And if we would just listen to the better part of our nature, then we would understand how offensive to nature and to God the English oppression of America is. And when we listen to those feelings, what is the result? He says at the end of the long paragraph on 345, near the bottom, they provoke us into justice. Justice. We're back where Winthrop began. It was important to Bradford. It was important to Cotton Mather. We saw justice mentioned a lot with Jonathan Edwards, right? God is just in choosing to keep people from hell and in choosing to allow people to fall into hell. Justice. We saw it with Benjamin Franklin. And here it is again with Thomas Paine. What are we fighting for? We are fighting for justice. And the result of this, he says, in the very last paragraph there on 345, I'm going to read this whole paragraph to you and then explain it, because it's sort of poetical, right? He says, "Oh, ye that love mankind, ye that dare oppose not only the tyranny, but the tyrant, stand forth. Every spot of the old world is overrun with oppression. Freedom has been hunted around the globe. Asia and Africa have long expelled her. Europe regards her like a stranger, and England hath given her warning to depart. Oh, receive the fugitive and prepare in time an asylum for mankind." Now, to go through this quickly, right? To oppose the tyrant as well as the tyranny is basically saying that you don't just pay lip service. That you don't just say, oh, well, that sure is bad. I mean, I'm opposed to the oppression of the people by the crown, but I mean, what can we do about it? He's the king. So he's saying, well, you can't just oppose the idea. You have to oppose the source of the idea, right? And then he notes, look, this is important because there is no place else on earth where freedom truly exists, right? Every spot of the old world, he says in this, he's talking about Europe largely here, right? From Greece through Italy on up. He says, Asia and Africa have long expelled her. And he would be including, the Middle East and stuff in here as well. But basically, he's making the argument here that there is no place on earth that has not fallen victim to monarchy and to tyrannical oppression. That this is the one last place left. I love the line where he says, Europe regards her like a stranger. Her, by the way, is freedom, right? Don't get confused. It's freedom. And so Europe regards her like a stranger. That's such great language because we just saw Crèvecoeur say, no one is a stranger in America. This is everyone's country. So great, use of the rhetoric here. And he says, receive the fugitive. The fugitive here, again, is freedom. So he's urging all the people in America, receive the fugitive. Receive freedom. Freedom has no place else to go. And what happens when you receive the fugitive freedom? Prepare in time an asylum for mankind. Take your freedom. Receive it. And then use that freedom to create an asylum for mankind. No one a stranger. A country for everyone. That was the goal, right? If we look at the crisis, I'm not going to go through this in detail with you because I believe that you're capable of reading this and understanding it. The rhetoric is very similar, although it's a more personal sort of account, right? It is, of course, a very famous piece of writing. You've probably seen these lines before, right? These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. You see that phrase, summer soldier, there, and some of you may be familiar with winter soldier, right, from Captain America. That's the idea, right? The summer soldier is one that isn't there when you need them. Yeah, it's a good time friend, right? Not there in the bad times. This is going to be difficult, he says, right? But the purpose of this, which is effectively a letter, is to say to those who are fighting, persevere. It's really interesting to us right now, I think, to read, because largely what he addresses in here is the power of rumor. He says our victories would already be more substantial, and the enemy's victories, that is the British, would be less substantial if people weren't falling prey to the rumors that are being spread by the British Army about their victories. He's trying to say, they're not having the victories that they keep saying they're having. Things are not as bad for us as they keep saying they are. We do have a very good chance at winning this. Now, the footnotes will tell you sometimes he fudges the truth himself, right? So there's an interesting discussion possibly to be had in here about, quote, fake news, right? But it's an interesting piece of rhetoric because, again, it is designed to sort of stir people and to acknowledge the fact that there's tremendous sacrifice that's going to have to happen, but that the sacrifice is worth it. And not only worth it, but that it is the just cause. Right? As people begin to question, is this a just war? Should we be doing this? Are we, are we in the wrong for killing these British soldiers? Or, should we be standing up for ourselves in this military way, right? Because those are legitimate questions that good people will ask, like, should I be doing this? And I don't know if I should. I know they were sort of oppressing me, but I don't know if I should be fighting back like this. I don't know if I should, I don't know, stoop to their level or something like this. He says on 350, this is the only part of this I really want to read to you. He says on 350, my own line of reasoning is to myself as straight and clear as a ray of light. Not all the treasure of the world, so far as I believe, could have induced me to support an offensive war, for I think it murder. Then he goes on to say, but if a thief breaks into my house, burns and destroys my property, and kills or threatens to kill me or those that are in it, and to bind me in all cases whatsoever, and again he's quoting here from the Parliament, to his absolute will am I to suffer it? This is the question, right? He's saying, look, I don't believe that this is an unjust war. I don't believe it is an offensive war to God, because that would be murder, and I am not a murderer. What I am doing is defending myself from the aggression of Britain. And throughout both of these pieces of writing, right, he's constantly saying, efforts were made, all the efforts for years, and he's right about this, for years had been made to try and negotiate independence on peaceful terms. And every time that negotiation was met with hostility, taxes got higher, military presence became more intrusive, life became more difficult. Ultimately, he says, the king forced the hand, right? That it got to a point where all you're doing now is defending yourself. You're not the aggressor. And I think this is it's an interesting approach here to try and reason through the moral complexities of conflict and freedom at the same time. And you see in his arguments discussions that are still relevant today. I'm not going to advocate for or against any of this, but I think Thomas Paine is one of those that people would do well to read, right? And to try and understand the context of it as well. The severity of the oppression that they were facing, the benefits that were to be gained from independence, the risk they took in this revolution. And, it's complicated, but the rhetoric here is really important. And one of the things that we'll see, of course, is not long after the successful revolution, Thomas Paine ends up back in England, and he's back in America. He's a sort of strange figure in history, but the rhetoric here was absolutely central to mobilizing people into revolution, and it becomes really central in reflecting upon for other writers going forward as well.